Many wars in the history of the world focus on stealth as a key tactical component. If your enemy doesn't know what your plans are, you can use their misinformation to your advantage. From coded messages to clever ploys to masking movements, the art of misdirection in warfare is one of the best strategies to employ. As Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, all warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. And when far away, we must make him believe we are near. However, stealth is only as good as the ability to remain undetected. The arms race between being stealthy and detecting those using stealth technology is always going to need to be taken into consideration when it comes to war. This means that no matter what, if something can detect an enemy, it's always going to be extremely valuable, regardless of age. This is especially true with regard to the United States McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. While it's a much older fighter, it's powerful enough to overcome the brand new Russian Sukhoi Su-57. To determine why the older model would dominate the new in most aerial engagements, we're going to delve deep into these fighters, look at their origins, the role they play in their nation's air force, and why these planes were initially created. With the Russian Su-57 being the newest piece of technology, it is a herald of things to come for the Russian war machine. Understanding how it works could help the United States and its allies prepare for that future. Let's get into it. The story of the Russian Su-57 gets its start back in the Soviet Union. Back in the 1980s, the Soviets decided they needed a new, next-generation combat fighter, one that would give them unmatched air superiority, while also allowing them to strike targets on the ground effectively. Two projects were started in an attempt to build the perfect fighter, but they were constantly delayed and then cancelled when the Soviet Union dissolved and the funds ran out. A competition in 1999 reignited interest in the project, with two companies taking the reins: the company Mikoyan and the company Sukhoi. Sukhoi eventually earned the rights to run the project, with their design focusing on a larger but also more combat-capable aircraft. In 2002, the research and development of the fighter jet began. However, while the design and shape were approved in 2004 and 2009, it wasn't until 2010 that a proper flight test would be completed. This was due to engine and other technical problems as the plane was being built. On the 29th of January 2010, a 47-minute flight test was finally successful. The Su-57 was inspired in its construction partially by the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. They wanted a super maneuverable stealth aircraft that removed a lot of the limitations noted by the Russians. The limitations included trouble recovering from a stalled flight and a lack of space for weapons bays. The aircraft went through a series of redesigns and delays, but between 2019 and 2022, production and delivery of the Su-57 was taking off. The Russians had designed a multi-role fighter that allows for the carrying and deployment of air-to-surface missiles and also air-to-air combat. Many Russian aircraft officials believe that the Su-57 could be the start of a new family of combat aircraft. The Su-57M is under production as a fighter jet that takes advantage of the new NPO Saturn Izdilai 30, also called AL-51F1 engines. The country felt these new fighters could be the start of the sixth generation of fighters. According to Russian Aerospace Force ex-commander and chairman of the Federal Council Defense and Security Committee, Viktor Bondarev, this is actually a splendid plane and it can embrace both fifth and sixth generation features. It has huge modernization potential. Importantly, it's the best among the existing versions of its stealth characteristics. It incorporates all the best that's available in modern aviation science both in Russia and in the world. However, the fighter is currently still unavailable in significant numbers. Russian development of the planes has been hampered due to international sanctions and problems with exports. While there are reports of the Su-57 fighter being used during Russia's war in Ukraine, they remain simple actors within Russian airspace. Given how many missiles and the earlier model Su-34 have been shot down over Ukraine, they likely don't want the Su-57 to be destroyed or even worse, shot down and captured. It does present some interesting data about the use of the plane because it should be thriving in the current conflict with Ukraine. A fifth-generation fighter in a high-threat environment, crawling with surface-to-air missiles, should be the perfect environment for the Su-57. However, it has been missing in action, especially since Russia wants to not only have this aircraft for themselves, but also wants to sell it to foreign markets. While success in the war in Ukraine might be one of the best ways to show off what the fighter can do, losing the invention would certainly be a massive setback for Russia's reputation. The Su-57 has only been built in limited numbers due to trade embargoes and international sanctions. They have created several prototypes and planes for test flights, but they have never seen combat. The first production aircraft created crashed during its delivery. Plus, the aircraft was only delivered to the Russian military in 2020, and it appears only 10 of these fighters are ready for combat. Although it's been predicted by Russian officials that 22 Su-57 fighters will be received by late 2024, the number is projected to go up to 76 by 2028. When comparing the Su-57 to other enemy planes, such as the American F-22 and F-35, Russian military expert Alexei Leonkov said the Su-57 outshines them by now in terms of the amount and diversity of armament. On top of that, the latest solutions, such as the second pilot as a system that facilitates aircraft control and combat operations, a spherical all-round radar that sees everything, and cutting-edge electronic warfare systems aboard the Su-57, leave the US rival far behind. For a long time, it had been believed that only F-22 and F-35 planes can be referred to as fifth generations, but these aircraft lack low radar signature and therefore can be shot down. The West would like to see us lag behind, but this is not the case. Clear progress can be seen in Russia with regard to both twin and single-engine aircraft. The Su-57 is the first fighter in the Russian fleet to focus on stealth. Stealth isn't just about becoming invisible to the naked eye, but also about overcoming various detection devices. Overcoming radar, sonar, and other methods is a challenge for anyone, but the Su-57 has some capabilities to overcome radar. For those who might be scratching their heads, radar, or radio detection, is used all around us. For military use, radar produces an echo. Sound waves bounce off a surface and return to the object projecting them, and this creates a picture of the object. The time it takes for those waves to bounce back to the projector allows for someone to see how fast that object is going. Using radar, an enemy plane can be tracked and detected with ease. So radar detection is the first hurdle the Su-57 needs to overcome. In order for radar to work, it needs to be able to bounce off an object and send a signal back to the sender. To combat this, the Su-57 reduces its radar cross-section by serrating the edges of the winds and control surfaces to give radar less to bounce off of. The plane is also coated in radar-absorbent material, RAM, to absorb radio waves. Nearly every part of the plane is coated in RAM or otherwise hidden. The weapons are kept inside hidden weapons bays that are carried internally, and the antennas are recessed from the plane's surface. The plane is small enough to avoid detection from super high-frequency radars, which are primarily those radars found in other aircraft. Larger radars will still detect the aircraft due to the size of the plane, but these radars can also pick up a lot of interference and are generally less precise. The Su-57 is invisible to most smaller forms of radar, but that doesn't mean it's invincible. It has one fatal weakness that the much older US F-15 fighter can take serious advantage of. The F-15 Eagle fighter jet was born out of a conflict between the US Air Force and the US Navy. Both branches of the military needed specialized fighters to fight in the Vietnam War. The Air Force pushed for a fighter that could handle itself in air combat with solid maneuverability. The Navy was pushing towards a multi-purpose aircraft that had endurance. However, due to expenses, they were being pushed to use common aircraft, and aircraft were needed that could support both the needs of the Air Force and the Navy. However, the Vietnam War changed the nature of air combat. While the current models of US fighters were able to take advantage of this combat scenario with their speed and optimized radar, they often lacked the ability to maneuver and didn't have the guns for close dogfights. Enemy fighters were starting to trend towards heading into visual range and battling in tighter maneuvers, which give the larger aircraft of the US a disadvantage. This disadvantage was further highlighted by the release of the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25 in 1967. This Soviet fighter had high speed and an added weight due to the use of stainless steel, but it was much faster than the current US aircraft. This kick-started an effort by the United States to try and improve their next generation of fighters. 4 companies submitted proposals to build the new fighter, but McDonnell Douglas was the winner in 1969. Both a single-seat and twin-seat version of what would become the F-15 Eagle were developed. The single-seat F-15A took its first flight in July 1972, while the two-seat F-15B was flown for the first time in July 1973. Eventually, new models of the plane were developed in 1978. The newer plane models were equipped with the Production Eagle package. The package allowed for the heavier plane to carry internal fuel and exterior conformal fuel tanks. The takeoff weight was also improved to 68,000 pounds. The F-15C and F-15D models also got to take advantage of the new Programmable Signal Processor (PSP) for the APG-63 radar. More improvements to the F-15 fighter were made in the following years. The improvements largely focused on upgrading weapons and upgrading the ability of the plane to fight with electronic warfare. In 2006, more modernization of the F-15C fighters would increase the cockpit display and would add infrared search and track systems. Finally, in 2015, an upgrade called the Golden Eagle planned to make the F-15 relevant until 2040. The upgrade focused primarily on the weapon count to double the load of missiles to 16, and extra fuel tanks that allow the fighter to take on longer engagements. Despite the long history of the fighter and endless upgrades and redesigns, the F-15 is a staple of the United States Air Force for a reason. It has a great many victories in aerial combat and has been used by the US and other allied forces for a very long time. This fighter is over 50 years old and it's never lost a dogfight. Despite early criticism that the large fighter would simply be too large and heavy to hold its own in a firefight, it's an extremely powerful jet. This triumph of engineering has an air-to-air record of 104 wins to 0 losses in combat. Now it isn't invincible, and over 125 F-15s have been lost outside of combat. The vast majority of these losses come from pilot errors, training accidents, and mechanical failures, but the record is standing at 2.93 aircraft destroyed per year, or 1.99 aircraft destroyed per 100,000 flight hours. It's also incredibly useful to various allies of the United States around the globe. From South Korea to Saudi Arabia, the F-15 and its variants are being used by foreign allies and are still just as effective. Additionally, the various upgrades and variants of the fighters are also allowing the fighter to keep up with the times. The F-15 Eagle was designed to be the ultimate fighter for air superiority, and it has become the best for sure. Being the best never goes out of style, and it's the perfect fighter for both long-range air-to-air combat and close-range base and homeland defense. Plus, according to Defense News, the F-15EX can shoot from a significantly increased range, farther than any other fighter in the US Air Force arsenal, and provides the unique capability of holding 12 AMRAAMs, AIM-120 Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missiles, or other large ordnance. Plus, this fighter has been used to launch the world's first ever air-to-orbit kill. When the US needed to take various satellites of the USSR into consideration, they prepared an anti-satellite missile that was designed to be fired from an airborne F-15. The missile was actually tested and confirmed a kill on the test satellite. So if enemy satellites ever need to be taken out, we know that the F-15 Eagle can do that too. The fighter just works, and it does what it needs to do and does it well. Plus, it has one ability that will allow it to stand up to the new Russian Su-57. This is the addition of an infrared sensor, the Legion Pod Suspension Container. Infrared is a way to detect foreign objects using electromagnetic radiation. The wavelengths are much longer than visible light, but can be detected with specialized equipment. Infrared is connected to the idea of fire because it emits invisible heat, and with infrared detectors, we can detect that heat. Now, you shouldn't confuse infrared with thermal. Thermal sensors are designed to detect heat as well as the differences in heat. This allows for a multicolored image that can be created whenever a thermal sensor looks at something. For example, many night vision goggles use thermal sensors to detect body heat. However, while thermal sensors create a multicolored image based on the temperature differences, infrared focuses on measuring the temperature directly. Infrared sensors work the same as radar. They send out a signal from a receiver, the signal bounces off an object, and then those waves bounce back to the receiver. However, instead of using radio waves, they use infrared radiation. Telescopes use infrared sensors to delve into the far reaches of cold space, because if something is emitting heat in space, it can be seen and can be observed. In the realm of military use, in 2019, a drone-mounted infrared camera was developed that enhances thermal imaging with infrared sensitivity. Every single object possesses a polarization signature, with man-made objects being different from natural objects. This camera, called the IR polarimetric camera, distinguishes from human signatures when compared to the background signatures of nature-made objects. This thermal polarimetry allows the drone to detect humans even in complete darkness, to the point where humans can be identified and recognized. The camera has been mounted on drones and has been used for a wide variety of ecological and military missions. This tech is going to be the key to overcoming the newest generation of stealth fighters. Simply because no countermeasure to long-wave infrared searching and tracking exists, any theoretical countermeasure would be far too large to exist on an aircraft, and the aircraft's frame would need to be designed to incorporate one anyway. The Legion Pod multi-function sensor system that's being developed by Lockheed Martin is designed to equip F-15 fighters with infrared detection generators. This system is designed to help planes target enemy forces even if radar isn't available to them, such as when working against stealth aircraft, because while planes can hide from radar, they can't keep their heat signature a secret. Paul Lemo, the Vice President of Fire Control Special Operations Forces Contractor Logistics Support Services at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Fire Control, said, "With a rapid delivery schedule and unmatched sensing capabilities, Legion Pod will immediately enhance our warfighters' operations and address a passive attack capability gap." According to available records, the F-15C has had the sensor system integrated into it for test flights, so it's already been used and can easily be integrated into various aircraft interfaces. For these fighters, the long-range infrared detectors will work with data transfer to allow F-15 fighters to search for stealth aircraft, mostly by sharing the data with the network and with other fighters in the area. Once the F-15C has a lock, it could destroy enemy fighters with long-range air-to-air missiles, so taking out targets hard and fast is what it's there for. The biggest issue that the F-15 has is what happens when the missiles are either dodged or the Su-57 survives the long-range volley. Then we will have a serious battle on our hands because both planes know that the other one is there. The F-15C is often armed with one internally mounted M61A1 20mm 6-barrel cannon with 940 rounds of ammunition, 4 AIM-9 Sidewinder and 4 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, or 8 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, carried externally. While it can be equipped with several different combinations of weapons, this is a pretty standard loadout. Some of the extra combinations can include AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles on its lower fuselage corners, AIM-9LM Sidewinder, or AIM-120 missiles on 2 pylons under the wings, and an internal 20mm Gatling gun in the right wing root. The Su-57 has 2 tandem internal weapons bays and 2 side weapon bays. It's armed with 4 beyond visual range missiles, the R-77M and the R-74M2. Still, new weapons are being considered and developed to replace the current loadout. 250 kg, 550 pound KAB-250 or 500 kg, 1,100 pounds KAB-500 precision-guided bombs are also used for air-to-ground combat. Much like the F-15 Eagle, the loadout can be customized depending on the mission. Finally, the Su-57 has a 9A1 4071K 30mm autocannon with 150 cartridges mounted internally. If these two aircraft met in battle, the fight would likely be decided at the moment of detection. If the F-15 can get its missiles off before the Su-57 can detect it, then the fight is over. However, if the Su-57 is able to close, it can bring its shorter-range weapons to bear. The maneuverability of the Su-57 is the key advantage of close-quarters combat, and it would likely be able to fly rings around the F-15. However, many military officials draw parallels toward the test flights between the F-15Cs and F-22As. The Lockheed Martin Boeing F-22 Raptor has also been regarded for its maneuverability, but it has lost a few fights to the F-15s. Furthermore, many tests have shown that supplements to the weapon systems and increases to target designation help. One of the best augmentations to the target designation is the Joint Helmet-Mounted Cueing System and the Raytheon AIM-9X Sidewinder. This gives the pilot the ability to shoot in the direction his head is pointed, and it gives the F-15C a serious advantage against the Su-57's maneuverability. Still, most of the training exercises and simulations don't give the F-15C pilot the win. Instead, it's often a mutual kill, with both fighters turned into smoldering wrecks when they battle one another at close range. This further emphasizes the need for accurate long-range detection of these stealth fighters, because the first strike of these missiles will ensure victory. But if we're talking about long-range combat and negating the largest advantage of the Su-57, the stealth, then the battle will end with the old US F-15 destroying the Su-57. The long-range first strike is the best strike, and going back to Sun Tzu, whoever is the first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field and has to hasten to battle will arrive exhausted. Basically, whoever strikes first has the advantage, With the long-range missiles, the F-15 will always strike first. It's a real duel of the fates. Now, the F-15 is an aging fighter. It has a jet that has served for 50 years, but it's also starting to be phased out, and will likely be phased out in 2024. This isn't a knock on the capability of the aircraft, but rather just a way for more money to be brought in for replacements that are more modern. Additionally, the F-15 airframes are starting to experience structural fatigue. Since many of them have been in use for 50 years, the strain on them can be understandable. Many of the fighters simply can't be repaired, and those that can move slower and are less maneuverable, to the point where they can't even match the speeds they were designed to match. With the United States Air Force restructuring itself, many older planes are getting retired, which begs the question, if the US and Russia get involved in a conflict, could any plane stop the new Russian Su-57? The Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II is one of the most current American fighters, and would likely be one of the first fighters used for defense. The fighter was designed with stealth in mind, much like the Su-57. It has serrated skin, measures to rescue the radar cross-section, and radar-absorbent skin that's durable and very easy to maintain. However, just because the fighter is invisible to radar doesn't mean it can't detect an Su-57. But at least it would be just as hard for the Su-57 to detect the F-35 without big and bulky radars that are often very imprecise and are prone to picking up clutter. The F-35 is also customizable and is armed with plenty of weapons that focus on both ground-to-air and air-to-ground combat. They also have both internal and external weapon systems, capable of carrying a large assortment of weapons, and they can carry 8 AIM-120s and 2 AIM-9s, using both internal and external weapon stations. The close-range M61A2 20mm rotary cannon has a fire rate of 3,300 rounds per minute. This is double the fire rate of the Su-57's 9A1 4071K 30mm autocannon, which fires at 1,500 RPM. The F-35 is designed to be a close air support fighter to battle targets on the ground, and they need that rate of fire. If the Su-57 does get into close range with the F-35, the battle might be close, but the F-35 would have a great many advantages to get a victory. Of course, we can't discount the pilots actually flying the planes, as pilots will be the deciding factor in any and every battle. However, judging by and solely on the mechanical side of things, an F-35 would be able to battle and defeat an Su-57. The F-22 Raptor would also be a current generation fighter that could hold its own and defeat the Su-57. While it's not produced in as large numbers as the F-35, it's still a fighter with a dedicated focus on stealth. The F-22 was the first 5th-generation aircraft, and it entered service in 2005. While it is being slowly overshadowed by the F-35, it's still a capable aircraft. The weapons that the F-22 can carry can also be customized, but it's been stated to be a very maneuverable aircraft, especially when compared to the Su-57. With that maneuverability and a skilled pilot, it would likely be able to get a kill. As it stands now though, the F-22 has not gained any serious victories in air-to-air combat. Looking at the facts, while the Su-57 is a very interesting and powerful fighter, and it's the first Russian aircraft that focuses on stealth, it just can't compensate for infrared detection that is already being done and implemented into older F-15 Eagle planes. Being able to see the plane and destroy it from a long distance is one of the best advantages in any type of warfare, regardless of the plane type. The F-15 Eagle just has the ability to do that, and if they can get that alpha strike off, the battle is already over. Until we actually see the Su-57 created in large numbers and engaging in actual combat operations, it will never be clear what it can do, especially if it is to be the 5th-generation plane that starts a new era in Russian air dominance. Until then, the older plane, coupled with a good pilot, is going to be the top dog in a dogfight. So, no matter the age of the plane, the old adage is true: he who strikes first wins. With the infrared detection abilities and the first strike range capabilities of the F-15, they can see the Su-57 coming and strike it down with no trouble at all.